They didn't see it coming. Not because you were loud, not because you were aggressive, but because you were calm when they expected chaos. They mistook your silence for weakness, your patience for ignorance, and your distance for fear. So they tested you again and again, thinking at some point you would break, react, or fall into their control. But what they didn't understand is that not everyone operates on the same level. Some people react to life, and some people observe it first, then move with precision when the moment is right. And when they pushed too far, when they crossed a line they should never have crossed, they didn't just see your reaction. They discovered something about you they were never prepared for. A strength they couldn't measure, a presence they couldn't shake, and a spiritual depth they completely underestimated. Lesson 1. They confused your silence with weakness. People are conditioned to believe that power must be loud, emotional, and visible. So when they saw you quiet, calm, and in control, they completely misunderstood you and assumed your silence meant fear, weakness, or lack of confidence. But in reality, your silence was never empty. It was awareness. It was discipline. It was the ability to hold your emotions when reacting would have been easy. Because while they were speaking without thinking and reacting without control, you were observing everything, reading intentions, understanding patterns, and choosing carefully where your energy should go, knowing that not every situation deserves your response, and not every person deserves access to your attention. And this is where they made their biggest mistake, because they judged you based on how they operate, not realizing that real strength is not in reacting instantly, but in having the control to stay grounded under pressure. And when the moment finally came, where you did respond, not emotionally, not impulsively, but with clarity, precision, and intention, it hit them in a way they didn't expect, because now they were no longer dealing with someone passive, but someone who had been in control the entire time. And that's when the truth became undeniable to them, that your silence was never weakness, it was discipline. And discipline is a level of power most people never reach, which is exactly why they couldn't recognize it until it was too late. Lesson 2. They tested you without understanding you. People have a habit of testing what they don't understand, and when they couldn't figure you out, they started pushing your boundaries, provoking reactions, and creating situations just to see how far they could go, believing that if they applied enough pressure, you would eventually break, react, or reveal a weakness. But what they fail to realize is that you don't operate from ego the way they do. You don't react just to defend your pride or prove a point. Instead, you move with awareness, patience, and control, which made you unpredictable to them. And unpredictability is something most people cannot handle because it removes their sense of control. So while they thought they were studying you, they were actually exposing themselves, showing their intentions, their insecurities, and their patterns, and you were watching all of it without rushing to respond, understanding that every action has consequences beyond the moment. And when the time finally came where you chose to act or respond, it wasn't driven by emotion, but by clarity and purpose, which is why it hit them harder than anything they expected, because they realized too late that they weren't dealing with someone they could manipulate or pressure into a reaction. They were dealing with someone who sees deeper, moves smarter, and understands timing. And that's when the test they thought they were giving you turned into a lesson they had to learn the hard way. Lesson 3. Your patience was your power, not your limit. Most people misunderstand patience because they only see it from the outside, where it looks like waiting, hesitation, or even weakness. But what they fail to recognize is that true patience is not about doing nothing. It is about holding control when reacting would be easy. It is about staying grounded when emotions are trying to pull you into impulsive decisions. And when they looked at you, they assumed your patience meant you had limits. They thought you were delaying because you didn't know what to do, or because you didn't have the strength to act. But in reality, you were doing something far more powerful than reacting. You were observing, learning, and allowing the situation to fully reveal itself, because you understood that acting too early can cost you clarity, and reacting too fast can put you in a weaker position. So while they were moving based on impulse, ego, and temporary emotions, you were building awareness, controlling your timing, and choosing your moment carefully. And this created a silent advantage that they couldn't see, because patience stores energy, it builds precision, and it gives you the ability to act with intention instead of emotion. And when that moment finally came where you decided to respond, everything shifted, because your response wasn't scattered or emotional. It was focused, it was controlled, and it carried a weight that only comes from someone who has mastered themselves. And that's what shocked them the most, because they realized that what they thought was weakness was actually restraint. What they thought was delay was actually preparation. And what they thought was a limit was actually power being held back. And in that moment they understood something they didn't before, that patience is not the absence of strength, it is the highest form of it, because anyone can react instantly, but very few people can stay in control long enough to respond at the right time, in the right way, and with the right level of impact. Lesson 4. They expected a reaction, but you gave them a shift. Most people are predictable in how they respond to pressure, because they are controlled by emotion. So when they are pushed, they react. When they are insulted, they defend. And when they are challenged, they fight back. And that is exactly what others expected from you. They expected anger, confrontation, or some form of emotional reaction they could understand and engage with. But instead of giving them what they anticipated, you did something far more powerful. You shifted your energy completely. You stepped back. You created distance. You refused to engage at their level. And that unexpected response is what unsettled them the most. Because when you don't react the way people expect, you remove their sense of control over the situation. And this principle is deeply reflected in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, especially during moments when he was insulted, rejected, and harmed by people who wanted a reaction from him. Yet instead of responding with anger or revenge, he often chose restraint, dignity, and a higher perspective. And one powerful example is when he went to Taif, seeking support, and was met with harsh rejection and even physical harm, where most people would respond with anger or a desire for retaliation. But he chose patience and mercy, refusing to respond at their level. And this was not weakness. It was a shift in perspective and power, because he was not reacting to the moment. He was aligned with a greater purpose. And this is exactly what people fail to understand when they deal with someone who operates on a deeper level. Because when you stop reacting emotionally and start responding with awareness, distance, and control, you are no longer playing the same game. And that's when everything changes. Because now they are left confused, unable to provoke you, unable to predict you, and unable to influence you the way they once thought they could. And in that confusion, they begin to realize that they didn't just lose a reaction, they lost access to your energy, and losing access to someone who is grounded, disciplined, and self-aware is a loss far greater than any argument they were hoping to win. Lesson 5. Your value was hidden until it was removed. One of the hardest truths for people to accept is that value is rarely recognized while it is consistently present, because the human mind quickly adapts to what is always available. It normalizes it. It becomes blind to it. And what was once special slowly starts to feel ordinary. And this is exactly what happened in your case, because your presence, your energy, your support, your understanding, and your consistency became something they assumed would always be there, something they didn't have to earn, protect, or even fully appreciate. And over time, they stopped seeing you for what you truly were, not because your value decreased, but because their awareness did. And this is where the illusion begins, because when people get comfortable, they start to take things lightly, they test boundaries, they overlook effort, they ignore the depth of what they have, and they convince themselves that it's not as important as it actually is. And that's why they felt so confident in how they treated you, because in their mind, nothing would change. You would still be there, still giving, still understanding, still holding the same space you always did. But what they didn't realize is that value does not need to announce itself. It reveals itself through absence. And the moment you stepped back, the moment you withdrew your energy, your attention, your presence, everything shifted in a way they were not prepared for, because now they were no longer experiencing you, they were experiencing the lack of you, and that absence created a clarity they never had before, because suddenly the silence felt different, the space felt heavier, the connection felt incomplete, and the things you used to do, the way you used to show up, the way you used to understand, without being asked, all of it became visible only after it was gone. And this is where realization begins, because humans often understand value through contrast, not through consistency. They don't fully see what something means until they feel what it's like without it. And that's when regret slowly starts to build, because now they begin to replay their actions. They begin to question their behavior. They begin to see moments where they could have done better, spoken differently, acted with more awareness. But at that point, the dynamic has already changed, because once someone who knows their worth steps back, they don't return in the same way. They don't give access in the same way. They don't offer the same level of presence without a shift in respect. And that's what makes this lesson so powerful, because your value was never dependent on their recognition. It was always there, always present, always real. But it required their awareness to be seen. And when that awareness came too late, it turned into something heavier than ignorance. It turned into realization without access. And that is one of the most difficult positions for anyone to be in, because realizing what you had after losing it creates a sense of loss that cannot be easily replaced. And this is why your withdrawal was not just a reaction, it was a revelation. It exposed the truth of the situation without you needing to explain anything. It showed them the weight of your presence without you needing to prove anything. And it forced them to confront something they were avoiding before, which is that not everything in life is replaceable. Not every person brings the same depth. Not every connection carries the same meaning. And when something rare is taken for granted and then removed, the absence doesn't just create space, it creates understanding. And that understanding changes how they see you, how they see themselves, and how they see the situation as a whole. But by that time, the balance has already shifted, because you are no longer in a position of being overlooked. You are in a position of being recognized from a distance, and recognition from a distance does not hold the same power as appreciation in presence. Which is why this lesson is not just about them realizing your value. It is about you understanding that your worth does not decrease when it is not acknowledged. It simply waits to be realized. And sometimes the only way for that realization to happen is through removal, through distance, through silence. Because when something is always there, it can be ignored. But when it is gone, it becomes undeniable. And that is when the truth finally becomes clear. Not through explanation, not through argument, but through experience. And by the time they fully understand it, they are no longer dealing with the same version of you, because you have already shifted. You have already stepped into a space where your value is no longer something that needs to be proven, explained, or fought for. It simply exists, and those who are aware of it will respect it, and those who are not will only understand it when it is no longer available to them. Lesson 6. They learned you're not easy to break. There is a moment in every test where the person applying pressure expects to see cracks, because most people are predictable under stress. They react emotionally, they lose control, they become overwhelmed, and eventually they break in ways that reveal their limits. And this expectation is exactly what gave them confidence when they dealt with you, because they assumed that if they pushed hard enough, disrespected enough, ignored enough, or applied enough emotional pressure, you would respond. Like everyone else, you would lose your balance. You would react impulsively, and you would fall into a pattern they could understand and control. But what they didn't realize is that you are built differently, not in a way that makes you immune to pressure, but in a way that allows you to transform through it. Because instead of collapsing under stress, You became more aware, more focused, and more disciplined. And this completely disrupted their expectations, because while they were looking for signs of weakness, what they found instead was stability. While they were waiting for emotional reactions, what they saw instead was control. And while they believed their actions would shake you, they slowly realized that their actions were revealing more about themselves than they were affecting you. And this is where the dynamic begins to shift in a way they cannot easily recover from. Because once someone realizes that their attempts to break you are not working, it forces them to confront something uncomfortable, which is their lack of influence over you. And influence is something people rely on more than they realize. They want to feel that their words, their actions, their presence can affect you in some way. And when that influence disappears, it creates a sense of loss of control that most people are not prepared to handle. And this is exactly what happened when you remained grounded, because your stability became a mirror that reflected their instability. Your patience highlighted their impulsiveness, and your control exposed their lack of discipline. And this is why they started to feel unsettled, because they were no longer in a position of power. They were in a position of uncertainty, and uncertainty creates fear. Not necessarily fear of you as a person, but fear of the fact that they cannot predict you, cannot control you, and cannot break you the way they expected. And this is where respect begins to form, even if it is unspoken, because people may not always admit it directly, but they recognize strength when they see it, especially when it is consistent under pressure. And consistency is what makes it undeniable, because anyone can appear strong in comfortable situations, but very few can maintain that strength when challenged repeatedly, when tested in ways that are meant to provoke, and when placed in situations designed to create reactions. And this is where your true nature revealed itself, not through what you said, but through how you remained, because you didn't just survive the pressure, you adapted to it, you learned from it, and you used it as a way to grow into a stronger version of yourself. And that kind of response changes everything, because now they are no longer dealing with someone who can be shaped by their actions. They are dealing with someone who uses those actions as fuel for growth, and that completely removes the power they thought they had. And when people lose that sense of control, they are forced into a different mindset, one where they become more cautious, more aware, and more respectful, because they understand that continuing the same approach will not give them the same results. And this is the moment where the lesson becomes clear to them, even if they never say it out loud, that not everyone can be broken. Not everyone responds to pressure the same way, and not everyone will fall into patterns that are easy to manipulate. And this realization carries weight because it forces them to rethink how they approach you, how they speak to you, and how they interact with you moving forward. And at the same time, it reinforces something within you, something that is far more important than their realization, which is your understanding of your own resilience. Because every time you face pressure and remain grounded, you strengthen your belief in your ability to handle more, to endure more, and to rise above situations that would have broken you in the past. And this internal growth is what truly defines your strength. Not the fact that others now see it, but the fact that you have lived through it and proven it to yourself. And that is a level of confidence that cannot be taken away, because it is built on experience, not opinion. And as this realization deepens, you begin to move differently, not from a place of needing to show strength, but from a place of knowing it is already there. And this quiet confidence becomes your foundation. It shapes how you respond, how you carry yourself, and how you engage with the world. And it creates a natural boundary that people can feel even if you never speak about it, because when someone knows they cannot break you, they approach you with a different level of awareness, a different level of caution, and a different level of respect. And that shift is not something you forced. It is something they arrived at through their own failed attempts, through their own observations, and through their own realization that you are not operating at the same level they expected. And that is what makes this lesson so powerful, because it is not about proving others wrong. It is about becoming someone who cannot be easily shaken, someone who grows through challenges instead of being defined by them, and someone whose strength is not based on external validation, but on internal stability. And once that level is reached, everything changes. Because you are no longer reacting to the world, you are moving through it with control, awareness, and a resilience that cannot be easily broken, no matter who tries or how they try. And that is the moment where the test ends. Not because they stopped testing, but because they finally understood that the outcome will never be what they expected. Lesson 7. Your strength comes from something they can't access. At the core of everything they fail to understand about you lies a truth that most people never reach in their lifetime, which is that not all strength is visible, not all power is loud, and not all resilience comes from the external world, because the deepest form of strength is the one that is built internally through discipline, belief, awareness, and a connection to something greater than temporary emotions and situations. And this is exactly where the gap between you and them was created, because while they were operating on a level driven by ego, validation, and immediate reactions, you were functioning from a place that cannot be easily seen or measured, a place that is shaped by your inner work, your ability to control your thoughts, your ability to detach from unnecessary conflict, and your trust in a higher purpose that goes beyond the moment. And this difference is what made you unpredictable to them. Because people who rely on ego expect others to respond in ways that feed that ego. They expect reactions. They expect emotional engagement. They expect a level of involvement that gives them a sense of control. But when they encountered you, they were faced with something entirely different. Something that does not respond on impulse, something that does not chase validation, and something that does not lose itself in temporary situations. And that's where their confusion began, because they were trying to understand you using a mindset that simply does not apply to you, and no matter how much they observed, tested, or pushed, they couldn't fully grasp what was guiding you, because your decisions were not based on the same triggers that guide theirs. Your actions were not driven by the same insecurities, and your responses were not shaped by the same need to prove something. Instead, you were anchored in something deeper, something more stable, something that gave you the ability to remain grounded even when everything around you was trying to pull you out of alignment. And this is what made your strength feel unreachable to them, because it was not something they could influence, not something they could manipulate, and not something they could access through their usual methods. And this is where the concept of spiritual strength becomes undeniable, because it is not just about how you handle situations externally, it is about what is guiding you internally. It is about the level of awareness you carry, the discipline you maintain, and the trust you have in a greater plan even when things are not immediately clear. And this kind of strength creates a different way of moving through life, one where you are not easily shaken by opinions, not easily pulled into conflict, and not easily affected by actions that are meant to disturb your peace. And when people encounter this level of stability, it challenges everything they believe about control and influence, because they begin to realize that there are some people they cannot reach in the same way, some people they cannot provoke in the same way, and some people they cannot break, no matter how much they try. And this realization creates a distance between you and them that goes beyond physical space. It becomes a difference in mindset, a difference in awareness, and a difference in how reality is experienced. Because while they are still reacting to situations based on emotion and ego, you are moving through those same situations with clarity and purpose. And this clarity allows you to see things they cannot see, to understand patterns they cannot understand, and to make decisions that are not influenced by temporary pressure. And this is why your presence alone can feel different to others, because it carries a level of calm, a level of control, and a level of awareness that is not common. And even if they cannot explain it, they can feel it. They can sense that you are not easily affected, not easily influenced, and not easily drawn into things that would disturb your balance. And this is what makes your strength so powerful, because it does not depend on external circumstances. It does not rise and fall based on what is happening around you. It remains steady, consistent, and grounded. And that kind of consistency is something most people struggle to maintain, because it requires inner work, it requires discipline, and it requires a level of self-awareness that is not developed overnight. And this is why they could not reach your level, because they were trying to access something externally that can only be built internally, and no amount of testing, pressure, or observation can give someone access to a level of strength they have not developed within themselves. And this is where the final realization begins to settle in for them, that what they were dealing with was not just a person, but a mindset, a level of awareness, and a depth of control that they cannot simply replicate or break. And that realization changes how they see you completely, because now they understand that your strength is not situational, it is foundational. It is not something that appears only in certain moments. It is something that exists within you at all times, guiding how you think, how you act, and how you respond. And this understanding forces them to accept something they were avoiding before, which is that not everyone operates at the same level, not everyone responds the same way, and not everyone can be influenced by the same methods. And once this becomes clear, their approach toward you changes, not because you demanded it, but because they have no other choice, because they now know that the version of you they thought they were dealing with never actually existed. It was a misunderstanding created by their own limited perception. And once that perception is broken, it cannot be rebuilt in the same way. And this is what makes your position so strong, because it is not dependent on their understanding. It exists regardless of it. And as you continue to move forward with this level of awareness, you begin to realize something even deeper, which is that your strength is not meant to be proven to others. It is meant to guide you, to protect your peace, and to keep you aligned with your purpose. And when you fully embrace that, you stop looking for recognition, you stop engaging in unnecessary battles, and you stop lowering yourself to levels that do not match your growth. And this creates a sense of freedom that most people never experience. Because you are no longer controlled by how others perceive you, you are grounded in who you know you are, and that internal certainty becomes your greatest power, because it allows you to move through life without being shaken by opinions, without being distracted by negativity, and without being pulled away from your path. And this is the level they could not access, the level they could not understand, and the level they could not break. And that is why their tests failed, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because they were trying to reach something that is built on a foundation they never developed. And that is the ultimate difference between you and them, a difference that cannot be closed through pressure, cannot be exposed through testing, and cannot be taken away once it is fully established within you. Conclusion. When they finally understood your rank, it was already too late. Everything they did, every test they placed on you, every assumption they made about you, and every attempt to provoke a reaction all led them to one final truth they could no longer ignore. You were never operating on the same level they thought you were. What they saw as silence was control. What they saw as weakness was discipline. What they saw as distance was awareness. And what they tried to break was actually what made you stronger. The real lesson here is not about them changing their behavior. It is about you realizing your own position in situations where others try to define your worth through their limited understanding. Because once people finally see your strength clearly, it is never because you explained it to them. It is because they experienced the consequences of underestimating it. And by that time, the dynamic has already shifted permanently. So, understand this deeply. Not everyone will recognize your value at first. Not everyone will respect your silence, and not everyone will understand your patience. But that does not reduce your worth in any way. Some people only learn through distance, through loss, and through the absence of what they took for granted. And when that realization finally comes, it does not place you in a new position. It confirms the one you were already in. The only difference is that now they can see it too. But by then, you are no longer waiting to be understood. You are no longer trying to be validated. You are simply moving forward with awareness, control, and a level of inner strength that cannot be easily shaken. And that is the final truth they discovered. Your spiritual rank was never something they could measure, control, or break. It was something they could only recognize after they tested it. And by the time they did, you had already moved beyond their reach.